My grandmother never once used a recipe card that I saw. Every bit of it lived in her head, and when she passed in 1991, most of it went into the ground with her. What I've got left is what I watched, standing at her elbow from the time I could see over the counter, and I want to get it down before it's gone. It lived in one woman's hands and died with her, the way it's died with women up and down these Pennsylvania hills for generations. Here's what makes this list worth staying for. Number 21 is a spoonful of something bitter she put in every chocolate cake, and food scientists have since worked out exactly why it makes the chocolate taste more like chocolate. Number 14 is the one thing she did to a biscuit that no store-bought can copy, and it takes 4 seconds. Number 1, she'd have laughed if you called it a trick. It was just the thing that made her food taste like hers and nobody else's. Let's count down 25 cooking tricks Grandma never wrote down. Number 25. The bacon grease can. A coffee can at the back of every stove she ever used. Every dripping off every skillet, bacon, sausage, fried chicken, strained down into that one can through a bit of cloth. That was the cooking fat for the week. Eggs fried in it, cornbread started with a spoon of it, green beans cooked down in it for hours. It carried a smoke and a salt into everything you cannot buy in a bottle. The one rule, strain it hot. Let it sit with the burnt bits in, and those bits turn first and take the whole can. Strained clean, it kept on that stove for a month and never went off. Number 24. Cold hands, cold everything. For anything with a crust or a biscuit, she ran cold. Cold butter, cold buttermilk. Hands run under the pump before she touched the dough. You want the fat to stay in cold lumps and not melt into the flour. When cold fat hits a hot oven, the water in it flashes to steam, and the steam blows the layers apart. Warm hands melt the butter in before it sees the oven, and then there's no steam, no layers, just a flat, hard thing. If the dough started feeling greasy or slack, she stopped and put the whole bowl in the cold pantry for 10 minutes before going on. Number 23. Don't work the dough. Watching her make biscuits was watching somebody barely touch them. Cut the fat in, wet it, brought it together, stopped. 10 seconds of handling, maybe less. Work wheat flour with water and it builds gluten, those long, stretchy strands that give bread its chew. And chew is exactly what you don't want in a biscuit. A barely touched one falls apart in your fingers the right way. Every first-time biscuit is a hockey puck, and it's always the same reason. Somebody worked it like they were mad at it. Number 22. The screaming skillet. Cornbread went into a cast iron skillet that had been sitting in the oven getting hot, with grease in it, until that grease was just shy of smoking. She poured the batter in and it hollered. That sizzle is the whole thing. Batter hitting metal that hot sets the outside in a second so it crusts instead of soaking, and the sugars in the meal brown and go toasty the way they never do warming up slow. That's the crust that a pan of cornbread lives or dies on. Pour the same batter into a cold pan and you get a pale, soft brick with no bottom to it. Same meal, same buttermilk, same everything. The heat in the pan was the difference the whole time, and it's the one thing nobody thinks to do. Number 21. A spoon of coffee in the chocolate cake. A little cold coffee, whatever was left in the pot, into every chocolate cake she made. Her mother did it, and she did it. Food chemists have since worked out the why. Coffee and cocoa share flavour compounds, and the coffee pulls the chocolate ones 2 or 3 times stronger. It doesn't make the cake taste like coffee, it makes the chocolate taste more like chocolate. You'd swear she used better cocoa. She didn't. Cold, leftover coffee. Nobody's brewing fresh for a cake. Number 20. Salt in the sweet. A pinch of salt in everything sweet. The cake, the pie, the cobbler, the candy. Salt quiets the bitter notes while it lifts the sweet. A pinch can make a thing taste noticeably sweeter without a grain more sugar. That mattered when sugar was dear. Leave the salt out and the dessert doesn't taste less salty, it tastes flat and dead. And most people can't put a finger on why. Number 19. The long, slow pot of beans. Soup beans went on of a morning and cooked till evening, low, with a piece of fat back, 4 to 6 hours. What you're after is the beans breaking down and thickening their own liquor into gravy. That's why it's called soup beans, not boiled beans. You eat the broth, and the broth only gets there with time. Rush them hot, and the beans burst on the outside and stay chalk in the middle. And salt goes in at the end. She was firm on that. Salt early, and the skins toughen, and the beans never soften. Cook them till midnight, and they're still gravel. Salt at the end. Number 18. Save the bean liquor. Nothing with flavour went down the drain in that kitchen. The water off the beans, the ham bone, the potato water, the greens liquor, all of it got kept and worked back in. The liquor off a pot of greens has near everything that cooked out of them sitting in it. The iron, the vitamins, the taste. You sop it with cornbread because pouring it out is pouring out half the meal. Potato water went into bread dough where the starch feeds the yeast and the loaf comes up higher and stays soft 2 days longer. A family that threw nothing away ate better than one that bought more and wasted it. Number 17. Wilt the greens with hot grease. First, tender lettuce and cress of spring torn into a bowl. Bacon grease poured over it straight out of the skillet, boiling hot, with a splash of vinegar in the grease. Killed lettuce, it's called. The hot fat wilts the greens soft in a second. The acid cuts the fat so it doesn't sit heavy. Ate like a cooked green and a salad at once, landing exactly in that stretch of spring when the cellar was empty. The grease has to be truly hot. Warm grease just makes a cold, greasy salad. She had the bowl waiting right by the stove so the grease didn't lose a degree crossing the kitchen. Number 16. The cat head biscuit and its gravy. Sawmill gravy off a half-pound of sausage fed the whole table, and the trick was the flour. She browned it in the hot grease first, stirred till it went the colour of a paper sack before a drop of milk touched it. That browning cooks the raw taste out. It's the line between gravy that tastes like paste and gravy that tastes like something. Then the milk goes in slow, off the heat, or it seizes into lumps you'll never beat smooth. 2 cups of milk, a spoon of flour, and the meat quit being the meal and became the seasoning for it. A half-pound of sausage across 8 people, and nobody rose from that table hungry. Number 15. Buttermilk in damn near everything. Always buttermilk because there was always butter being churned. Went into the biscuits, the cornbread, the pancakes, the fried chicken soak. The lactic acid meets the soda and throws carbon dioxide that lifts the batter, and that same acid tenders the crumb. A buttermilk biscuit comes out soft where a sweet milk one comes out tight. Turned buttermilk near on the edge worked better than fresh. She never threw out a jug that had gone sharp. She baked with it. Number 14. Don't rest the biscuit dough. Here's the 4-second thing from the top. She did not rest the biscuit dough. Got it in the hot oven fast, because the soda and buttermilk start throwing gas the second they meet, and that gas is your lift. It doesn't wait. Let a soda biscuit sit on the counter and the rise goes up into the air before it ever sees heat. Yeast bread you rest. A soda biscuit you run. Most people have that completely backwards. Number 13. Corn shucks and bean bread. Cherokee families up in these mountains wrapped a corn and bean dough in soaked corn shucks, tied it and boiled it. The wrap holds the soft dough together in the boiling water so it doesn't cloud off into the pot, and puts a flavour in from the leaf itself. Corn is short one thing your body needs, and beans are short a different one, and each has what the other lacks. Together they feed you complete. People lived on that pairing 400 years before anybody could tell you why it worked. Tie it loose and water gets in and you pull a bag of mush out of the kettle. The tie has to be tight. Number 12. Leather breeches. Green beans strung whole on a thread with a needle and hung behind the stove to dry for weeks. Hard and papery, they keep a year in a sack. The water's out below where anything can spoil, same as jerky. Come January, soak them overnight and boil 2 or 3 hours with fat back, and they come back. They don't taste like a fresh bean. They taste deeper and a little funky, and mountain people preferred it, and I do too. One rule: they have to hang somewhere dry with air moving. A damp corner and they mould on the string. A moulded one you throw out. You don't soak it and hope. Number 11. Brine in a crock. Before glass jars got cheap, her mother kept corn and beans and kraut in a stone crock under salt brine, weighted down with a scalded plate and a creek rock. The salt holds off rot, while the good souring bugs eat the sugar and turn it acid. Once sour enough, nothing bad can live in it. No jars, no lids, no fire, no canner. You build a brine, you wait it, you walk off for a month. The one law: the vegetable stays under the brine. Let a piece bob up and it moulds. The mould can take the whole crop. Under the brine, always. Number 10. Pickling the whole end of the garden. Frost coming and still green tomatoes, cabbage, peppers, onions out there that would never ripen. She chopped the whole business, salted overnight to pull the water, cooked it down in vinegar with a little sugar and spice, and put it up. Chow chow. It's not a recipe, it's an answer to a problem. The garden's dying, and none of this will make it. What went in depended on what was still standing. It sat on the table all winter, on top of the beans, a little bite of acid and crunch against something soft and starchy. Every family's was different, and every one of them was right. Number 9. The spring house instead of an icebox. Her people kept milk and butter cold with no ice and no power at all. A little stone house built over the spring, crocks set down in the running water. Groundwater comes up at about 52 to 55 degrees year-round and carries the heat off steady. Butter kept. Milk kept a couple of days. A cooked dish kept overnight in July. They set it where the cold water was, not where it was handy. Reading the ground to find a cold spring was the skill. The little house was just the easy part after. Number 8. Kraut by feel. Her mother made kraut by moon signs, and I'll be straight, there's no science that says the moon changes a crock of kraut. But here's what was real underneath it. Making kraut by hand, you learn the feel and the smell when the salt is right, when it's sour and clean, and when it's going wrong. The moon calendar was something to hang that knowing on, and the knowing was true even when the calendar wasn't. She could walk past a crock and tell by the smell it needed tending. No almanac taught her that. 60 years of her nose did. I'll not sell you the moon, I'll sell you the nose, because the nose worked. Number 7. Rendering lard right. Cut the fat small, cook it low and slow, never scorch it, strain clean while hot. Get it too hot and the lard browns and won't keep. A winter's cooking fat ruined in an afternoon. Done right, it's white and near tasteless, keeps in the cellar for months and makes a pie crust store shortening cannot touch. All I know is her crust shattered and theirs just bends. The cracklings, brown bits left in the strainer, went into cornbread. Nothing wasted, not even the bottom of the lard pot. Number 6. A little vinegar in the pie dough. A spoon of vinegar in the water for her pie crust. The acid keeps the gluten from building up tough, so the crust stays tender instead of turning to leather. The sour cooks off entirely in the oven, not a trace of it in the finished pie. It gave her a little room, a crust more forgiving of handling, which matters when you're making 4 pies for a funeral and moving fast. Plain white vinegar, a spoon. Dump in a slug of cider vinegar and you'll taste it. Number 5. Sourdough before anybody called it that. A crock of starter kept alive on the back of her mother's stove. Flour and water gone wild and bubbling. Fed and used and fed again, older than some of the children. Wild yeast and sour bugs living in the flour, raising the bread and souring it at the same time. Families passed a starter down like a piece of furniture. Let it go too long unfed and you lose it. And if it was your grandmother's starter, you don't get that back. You get a new one that isn't hers. Number 4. Reading the fat for frying. No thermometer ever hung in that kitchen. She fried in lard that was exactly right every time by flicking a pinch of cornmeal in and reading what it did. Meal that sits there, fat too cold, chicken soaks up grease. Meal that scorches and smokes, too hot, burns outside, stays raw inside. Meal that dances and browns slow and even, that's your temperature. She hit it by eye because 40 years of frying taught her exactly what that dance looked like. That's the secret to fried chicken that isn't greasy. Right heat. I can tell you to look for the dance. I cannot give you the 40 years that taught her what the right one was. Number 3. The whole hog, salt and smoke. Hams and shoulders packed in salt, brown sugar and pepper for 6 weeks in the cold. Salt pulls the water out, and a thing with the water out cannot rot. That's the whole of curing in one sentence. Had to hold between 36 and 40 degrees the entire 6 weeks. Too warm and it spoiled before the salt took. Too cold and the salt wouldn't strike. Then hickory smoke, 30 days of it, never pine. A proper country ham hung and aged a full year before anybody cut it. The men who could read a smokehouse by the smell of it are nearly all gone. There were 3 on our creek when I was a boy. There are none. Number 2. Cornbread and buttermilk in a glass. The plainest thing her people ever ate, and one most folks alive have never had. Cold cornbread crumbled down into a tall glass, buttermilk poured over it, eaten with a spoon. That was supper, not a snack, supper, 1,000 nights. At the end of a day when there was nothing else and everybody was too worn out to cook another thing. And it feeds you better than it sounds. Corn is short of something your body needs, and the milk fills it back in. So the two together hold you where cornbread alone would leave you hungry by dark. Nobody in that kitchen knew the word protein. They knew it held you till morning, and it took a minute to make. I still eat it. My daughters think it's the saddest thing they've ever watched a man eat. They're wrong. Number 1. Cooking without a single measure. Here's the one she'd laugh to hear called a trick. She never measured anything. Not a cup, not a spoon, not once that I saw. A handful of this, a couple fingers of that. Flour till it looked right, salt till it smelled right. She knew a biscuit dough was wet enough by how it pulled off the side of the bowl. Knew a cake was done by the smell before she ever opened the oven. Knew the beans wanted salt by tasting the broth off the back of a spoon. That's not sloppiness, that's the opposite. It's knowing a thing so deep in your hands that the measuring cup would only slow you down, because a cup of flour weighs different on wet days than dry ones, and her hand knew the difference, and the cup never would. And that's the part that couldn't be handed down. She could give you the receipt for the cake. She could not give you the hands that knew when it was right, because those took 60 years at that stove. When it was over, the knowing was over. That's what actually dies, not the recipes. We've got plenty of recipes. What dies is the hands. There is no writing the hands down. Here's my challenge. Pick one thing off this list and go do it. Not by a measuring cup, by feel. Put the coffee in the chocolate cake. Get the skillet screaming before the cornbread goes in. Crumble cold cornbread in a glass of buttermilk and find out it isn't sad at all. Then tell me in the comments what your grandmother did in that kitchen that she never wrote down, that you only know because you stood there and watched. Whose hands were they, and what county did she cook in? Some of it is still out there in somebody's memory. Let's write it down while we still can.